Book bans. Two words that have had teachers, authors, parents, readers, and of course, librarians up in arms across the world. It just doesn't look very good across the nation right now, does it? If you've been paying attention to the news, or even just social media, you're probably aware that book bans have been on the rise for the last couple of years now, and it only seems to be getting worse. The American Library Association has released new preliminary data documenting the continued rise in attempts to censor books and materials in public, school, and academic libraries during the first 8 months in 2023. Between January 1st and August 31st, 2023, ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom reported 695 attempts to censor library materials and services and documented challenges to 1,915 unique titles. The number of unique titles challenged has increased by 20% from the same reporting period in 2022, the year in which the highest number of book challenges had occurred since ALA began compiling this data more than 20 years ago. Most of the challenges were to books written by or about a person of color or a member of the LGBTQIA+ community. My name is Lauren. I'm an MLIS grad student and the Student Advocacy President at San Jose State University. I, like many other students, have been watching the world respond to the issue that severely impacts the industry that many students like myself are hoping to enter. Admittedly, it looks pretty bleak. That's why I decided to put out a call to get the perspective of real-life experienced librarians today, to hear their side of the story. Even though
an angry guy called me, but it was really funny.
Full voice. I'm like, I thought it was the same thing.
Not a single person.
Yeah, exactly. This is good. This is a good time to graduate now. Yeah, that's so cool. Well, thanks for letting me know.
What I say is, have them read the book.
Today's story is Ariel's. She's a community college librarian and public library liaison, and she's the first person that responded to my call for interviews. Let's get to it. So believe it or not, you were the first person to accept this.
Really?
Yes. So, and you reached out to me, which was like, oh, nice. So, I've tried to connect to my local library, and I was directed to speak to a PR person instead. And which already tells you the kind of
the climate.
Yeah, exactly. That they weren't that they're like talk to this person first, and so we'll see what happens with that. But
primarily, so I'm a reference librarian at a community college. And primarily, like, most of my work is that. So I do reference, I do instruction, all that good stuff. But the community college partnered with a city in our county, so like a rural city. And that city wanted to pull away from the county's library system because they had closed that library during the pandemic with, honestly, no promise or sign of reopening, even though the community really wanted it. They sent a petition around, they asked the board of supervisors, everything. The city partnered with the community college district and said, all right, we want to reopen our library. And then community college district said, okay, we will provide staff for you to be able to do that. That will run the library side of stuff. And at the time that was happening, I was hired to be a program manager. So I went to SJSU too. And I was in grad school at the time, had worked previously in public libraries for about 3.5 years, had worked for the county library system. And so knew my way around. And so they hired me as a program manager. And I think in part they did that because they knew this was coming down the pipeline. And then they put me in charge of that project. So I helped open the library as a program manager and then just stayed on. Even though I had transitioned I got a, temporary full-time librarian job. And then I applied and I got the permanent one. I'm still helping. So that's what liaison means. It means unofficial. It means that I am unofficially helping make sure it runs. I'm only there on Fridays for a half day. I do things kind of from afar, sort of the way a director would, you know what I mean? from elsewhere, although I'm not a director. And I work with the city of people, and then I help work with who are there, the college staff. Confusing, but that's kind of how it works. And like now, what I mostly help with is I'll help them with projects at the branch, like help direct work, like we genrefied our fiction collections, help with other things, like hopefully we're getting like an awe station soon. Like we just got a new type of book that we're incorporating. So I'm still like directing work kind of from afar, and then help out with like collection development and stuff like that.
So that would be, I imagine, a fairly different experience from working at the community college.
We had a weird rut kind of that we hit in June. Not a rut, but it was a bump in the road because staff were going to put up a pride display. And then it was immediately nixed by the city side. And it was just difficult because we're already in a weird situation where it normally pretty much works, but academia is interesting because you have your departments, right? And the boss is the dean of the department. And the dean is not there to see your day-to-day work, right? It's not like a normal supervisor. And there are people in place that sort of have influence, right? That can let the dean know things or help you out, right? Like library chair, for instance, or like our head of circulation. But technically, neither of those people are supervisory. Being kind of told what to do by someone who isn't their boss and isn't even in the same work structure as they are. And then to make matters worse, like at the time, the dean and the chair were both, it's summer. So that's the other thing with academia. Everyone goes on vacation in the summer. So they were both gone. And so it was kind of a situation where it was the staff of the college, at that public library, and then me trying to figure it out and deal with the city saying, no, you cannot have a pride display. A lot of times you're seeing stuff where people are complaining about the display, and that's where you're seeing the book bans, and that's how they're logging the book bans. But less often do you see incorporated in those statistics people logging when their own administration, is saying, no, you can't do it. That was sort of the situation we were finding ourselves in, where it was preemptive. They knew that it would make people mad, and so they said, we're not going to deal with it. We just don't want to show those books.
The library I'm hoping to talk to, I'm in Huntington Beach, California. And
you're in I was reading about y'all.
That's what I was gonna say. We're public, so it's kind of obvious what's
I was reading about y'all, yeah.
So a year ago, like, we had pride flags and everything in the city. And then this year, it was like no flags unless they're California or American flag.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. And you can already get the idea of what's going on. So they were allowed to have a display, but there's been other backlash that's been going on related to city government and just people more generally. I follow my library on social media, all of that. Like, like every month or so, there's some sort of themed time. So it's not unusual for there to be a themed whatever it is. But if anybody mentions, LGBTQ content and teens or children in any way, people are going to go crazy about it now. I don't know if that was always true, but it feels especially true now.
Or I think it definitely is. I mean, it's just a focal point now. Yeah, it's definitely more true now.
But like, there are comments that are like tagging city officials in them, being like, "Is this acceptable for them sharing this?" and that sort of thing. And
they probably have that like list of books that Moms for Liberty like sends out in mass. Yeah.
Because you work at a university as well, I imagine that's less of a problem on a college campus, I would think.
Yeah, at the college campus, it's less of a problem. I mean, there's still like politicized factions here. Like we're having our own sort of drama where like there's just some people here. Well, there's there's some, we're having issues with like an equity and diversity part of like academic senate, like the council basically. Some people were mad about that existing, and they were mad that people wanted more representation of students and staff on there because faculty, surprise, surprise, predominantly white, full-time faculty anyway, and they wanted to have more input, more voices that were staff. Students, because they are not predominantly white. So they split off and created their own faction where they have like some stupid club. So, I mean, that's happening. But as far as like protection of like able to do things, like, yeah, I teach an evaluation workshop for sources, and my stuff that I used last spring was like trans news, like trans people in the media. And I'm allowed to do that, and no one can tell me I can't. which is great. But, you know, working, since we have that presence in the public library, because small public library, and it's confusing because it is their library, and yet we technically provide staff for the library side of things, and are finding like that we're very in the weeds as conflict comes from that, you know what I mean? So it's confusing. It's confusing because technically we're also in a collaborative agreement with them. So if staff were to then do the pride display, that could be jeopardizing that relationship, and it could feasibly be jeopardizing those staff's jobs, right? Because if that relationship goes away, I don't know what we do with those jobs, you know? They might fire them. So it's very unique, like the situation we are in, but it also is still makes jobs tenuous, and it also is, yeah, making access to those titles, because we have those titles. But the thing is, like, the point of a display is so that people can see that you have those titles, and not to make them mad. It's to increase access and make people know, hey, this is a safe space for you, and you can ask for these titles. Like, you won't just go up to me and be like, where are gay books at? But you might if you've seen my pride display and you know that we're safe, you know, which I tried to explain to the boss over there, basically. And we just philosophically were seeing it differently, because in his mind, it was going to create waves, and waves would mean we couldn't have those books anymore, I guess, you know, or we'd lose the goodwill. And I'm like, there are queer people in this community, dude. Like, there absolutely are. So if you've chosen, like, by not catering to them, you've chosen a side of who you're catering to. I know a lot of libraries now have tried to pass by their city council or their supervisors or whatever, an official display policy. So that's something that libraries have done. And it says, you know, similar things to what your collection development policy should say, but it's just specifically about displays. He said he was adamant that we could not get something passed by city council. So I was like, okay, fine. And we have an internal policy around displays now, which first, they wanted language saying, oh, that we would not put up displays that were offensive to anyone. And I was like, no, that's not I cannot in good conscience sign off on that. So what we ended up doing was saying we take into consideration all facets of community opinion, but we still put up displays, it was like that. So we have that now, but it doesn't really feel that great. It doesn't feel, like in October, honestly, I'd like us to try again and have a display. I don't know if we will. I don't know if we'll, because we never got to do one in June. And, the staff that were there were really demoralized, for like a week. One of the staff, they were like, I didn't even put up any books. It was empty, like in protest.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing is like, you have staff that are queer, right? Like you might be demoralized just as a human, but it's like, you're also, taking a stand against any of your staff who might be LGBT. And that hurts us. So yeah, they were pretty demoralized. And we ended up we put queer books on display, just front facing within shelves.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right about it being kid focused, because the issue was really that we would be showing books that were for kids. He pointed out, well, if you have like a Valentine's Day display for adults in February, it makes sense that you would have LGBT books on there. I'm like, okay, but we can't have educational. And then they're like, well, I don't want the goal of the displays to be educational, because I think that's where we get into trouble. And I was like, okay. So he wanted them to be more marketing standpoint. And I said, okay, well, he's like, I want to market to groups in our community. I said, oh, you don't want to market to everyone in our community. And he looked at me, I said, you don't want to market to gay people. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, I was getting kind of heated. So
yeah.
We were able to have conversation. We stayed in dialogue, we did the thing, but at the same time, it doesn't really feel like it doesn't to me feel like a victory. And again, I don't know if it will be a victory, because I don't know if we'll ever do a display there. See, absolutely. At the community college, I put up a pride display. We worked with our LGBT student group, and they had resources, and it was cute and it was great. But
it's funny because in some ways it's like there's so much progress that's happened in a lot of ways, and then so many steps back too, that it's like I feel like, I'm 32, and I feel like, why now that you have to wait till you're in college to when it's like when we have the potential for resources. There's obviously a ton of misinformation, as though every book that involves queer characters is going to be highly sexualized. I think sometimes people are just already so upset about whatever they imagine something to be. They don't actually do the examining into what it is.
I think the misinformation around like the sexualizing of, I don't know, I see even people I know like that share reels or whatever about like, oh, this book is in the kids section of the library. I'm like, first of all, no, it's not. Like in that video, I can see on the spine label it's YA. So don't do that. It's literally not in the kids section, but also the ones that are in the kids section, read them. They're not sexual at all. They're just books. They're stories. Like some of them are great. It was really sad this June because first of all, that stuff was happening personally, like in a work situation I'm in, but also every day on all those library groups, I kept seeing people post saying, we're not allowed to do it. We're not allowed to do it. We're not allowed to do it. Someone complained. We're not allowed to do it. Da, 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 da. All these things. They couldn't have a pride display. Books were being challenged. It was awful. It was just really, really demoralizing. And, you know, some people who are like, well, we're not allowed to do a pride display. So I'm doing rainbow reads. I'm like, I'm, you know, glad you can find a workaround. Yeah. It's really sad. And the same thing's happening around banned book weeks. Yeah. It's all, you know, now the organization, you know, who helps organize that, Freedom to Read or whatever, they're calling it Freedom to Read Week. They're not even calling it Banned Books Week anymore because of the backlash they get. It sucks. I don't know. That's the moral of the story. It's a huge bummer.
It's definitely discouraging to see how politicized certain things are now. I mean, I guess they always have been, but even more like
they're worse. It's worse. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely. I mean, and like I haven't worked in libraries that long, and I'm 33, so same age basically. But I have worked in libraries for a bit, right? Like I worked in them since I was like 26 or so, and I will tell you, like even in that small amount of time, no, not the same at all. Not the same at all. Yeah. It is wild how much, and I mean, if you even track like ALA's or Pen America's numbers on book bans, like they're doubling every year now for the past like 3 years. So it's just been worse. It's been worse and worse. And libraries are like weirdly the target. I mean, mostly school libraries, but public is absolutely still happening.
Is there anything that you are most concerned and or optimistic about regarding this, since you're obviously you're in an interesting crossroads of both different types of libraries?
I'm not optimistic at all. To be frank with you, I'm not optimistic at all. People have like a really rosy glasses view of libraries, and they're very, very nostalgic for them, so they love them, but most people are not willing to put in the work to support the libraries when they need it. Like won't even do, like I've been saying for the past few years to everyone I can, call your library during Pride Month and ask what programs they're having. Look for their display. And if they have one, thank them in writing. Like they need evidence that people want this and need this. If they don't have one, ask them why in writing, you know, and like get the admin involved, make sure they're CC'd on this stuff, you know, make sure the board of supervisors are CC'd, because quite honestly, like these far right groups are, it's embarrassing. They're way better at organizing than we are, way better at it. And I don't know how to make people organized in that way. I don't know how to get them off their asses and actually doing something. But the truth is, yeah, these groups are better at it than us. Like it's not even a competition. So yeah, I'm not hopeful at all because there needs to be like a huge shift. And I just think that right now, the huge shift that's happening is not one of progress. It's a reactionary shift. And I don't think it can be curtailed right now. I think it'll take 10 to 15 years at least. Because I mean, if you look at the highest thing in the country, I mean, I hate to, this is so depressing. It's like so depressing. If you look at the highest institution in the country, the Supreme Court, we're fucked, okay? That's already fucked. Anyways, that's been stacked, right? That's been stacked with conservatives who are pushing a certain view. I think part of the politicizing that's hard is people are now trying to enact policy to sort of control people in a way that they maybe weren't 20 years ago. I mean, they always are, but not as much. That's rough. But then also you have this sort of grassroots movement coming from the far right, guarding things like book bans, but that's just one tip. That's just one prong of like the guerrilla warfare, because they're also running for your school board. They probably already have, you know, it sounds like in Huntington Beach, they're alive and well and doing great. They're friends with city council if they're not on it. So they have created nested positions of power for themselves that they will likely be in for years to come. Mm-hmm. And they've been doing that the past 3 years. And again, like with pretty good success, like even here in California, you know, it's crazy that you and I are both in California and we're talking about this right now. because everyone is like, oh, California, it's never gonna be a problem. I'm like, you're stupid. You don't know. You don't know about like, there are areas. And it's also funny because like you're Huntington Beach, which is wildly different than Bakersfield and Kern County, right? Like y'all have money, y'all have a beach. We are dry and we are poor, but here we are, you know, both in a similar situation where conservative politics are trying to control what's happening. That's just me being on my high horse or whatever and doom and gloom. But I just don't see it changing for the good. I think we're in kind of the long haul right now. I do think like if there is a silver lining, I mean, it's that there's people that are just, they're in it. They're in it for like, I don't know, I'm going to just be here till I die, you know, like I'll just be doing a thing. And as discouraged as I get, and like as much as I need to remember to like have self-care and like keep doing this thing, like there's people like you that give a shit, there's other people that give a shit. And you know, as dirty as my hands may have to get, you know, I don't like having to make compromises. At the end of the day, if I can have books in the library that people have access to, like that's a win. That's a win, even if I don't feel great, you know. So that's the only thing. And the other thing too, I don't know if this is, it's not optimism, but something that I'm really hoping for. There's 2 states, Illinois and New Jersey, I think, are the 2. One of them has actually passed this legislation. I believe Illinois, and New Jersey has it in the works. Do you know about this legislation?
Yeah, I believe I know what you're talking about. Like, isn't it the ban against book bans? Yeah.
Yeah. And it protects libraries and it protects librarians and it allows them to have, surprise, surprise, like materials in their collections, right? And that they get to make the decisions. So like that's the one thing, like if there could be an action item for me, it would be, I mean, the stuff like call your library, but also call your rep. I'm not even political, dude. Like I don't want to be political. I don't super believe in the efficacy of voting, but call your rep anyway. And I have and said like, I want this bill. Like, can you please make a bill like this happen in California? That would be awesome. Because I don't think otherwise in 10 years, I don't know if we'll have these books on the shelves if we don't have something like that. So that's something that I would love to see. And I mean, with like recently, the attention has been getting on both sides. Like I know Biden's aware of this stuff. Obama just recently was talking about book bans a few days ago. Feels like the time is right to be able to pass something like this. And I feel like in California, it could be passed. And it's just a protection that unfortunately, like areas like yours and mine need.
I think that even like people in library circles, unless you are like in it, you really don't know what's going on, like bill wise, or like who your representatives are, or anything like it's not something I was that conscious of anyway. Like most students, I don't think are really aware of. And I think that in general, like I didn't really know what it means to do what is library advocacy, you know, like
yeah.
Like a line of communication to like let people be aware of things. I think a lot of us are in our own bubbles.
Yeah.
Like, it's great to find, like as I've been a student, all the different groups and areas that a lot of people in libraries hang out, like the Facebook groups and such.
Yeah.
That's good that exists. But I think that like getting people outside of these circles to know about what's going on is like what we're trying to do, basically. It's very hard to get people to be aware of something and to care about it before it's like the end of the world bad. Like
I know.
it has to be a drastically like obvious problem for people to start caring about it. It feels like sometimes it's just like a matter of like explaining it to people and like that they can understand isn't jargony and insidey and all of that. And I know people are aware of book bans and such.
Yeah.
But,
well, a lot of them think it's like an old thing. They're like, oh, back in the day. I'm like, no, right now. Like they love to talk about the groups that were out there or whatever. I'm like, yeah, well, not anymore. Like people are fine with that book now.
Before I even applied for grad school, I shadowed a children's librarian, a teen librarian at my library, just to get an idea of like what is it like to like what do you actually do and that sort of thing. And she was talking about how they have a form so that if anybody challenges a book, they give them the form and they say, like, fill this out, show me where the issues are, show us what page, like what are the quotes, what are the things. And people half the time don't have an answer and they don't want to fill it out. Then that's dead on the cutting room floor because they didn't actually have anything. So that was like a break between them and the people that might have issues. But I feel like since then, unfortunately, there's been a even more like, you know, obviously on social media and all of that. Like, I don't know, people are trying to think of creative ways to to be like, just think, like, just show me where the book has the issue. Don't just say it has the issue. Like, or
We have that. And that's the other thing that's frustrating when administration just won't let the process be the process. I mean, that was something I was talking about as soon as we open or before we open a library. You know, it's like we really need like good collection development policy, and we need something that says, here's your process for challenges, you know? So it's like that where, yeah, it asks to list the pages, it asks if you've read the book, it asks like what you found offensive, and it also asks what would you recommend instead? Like if you have a book you'd recommend, and also where you found this book, like how did you hear about this book? You know, because that's good for us to know. And the thing is, like most people, yeah, like for me, I always tell people like that's an opportunity of engagement with someone. So that makes it more personal where, you know, they may come with their pitchfork because like a fire got put under their ass online or whatever. But when they're talking to a real person who's listening to them, it's an education opportunity, and it's a moment for like good customer service. So when you don't let that happen, you're keeping your community in the dark. You're hurting everyone in your community, honestly, because you're denying them the chance for education, but you're also denying access and denying humanity to another group of people. So I think that advocacy work is really important right now. The frustrating thing is just that like often like with any misinformation, it's usually, you know, something pithy and short is what sticks in people's heads, but it's hard to condense truth to that, you know? So that's the problem. It's like the issue, and what I always tell students when I'm talking about evaluation, I mean, I give them a bunch of tools, we do this and that. But one tip I always give them is if you're hearing any information that sounds alarming about children, just automatically, like I'm not trying to teach you to be suspicious, but just throw that out. Just don't trust that. And you really have to dig deeper and see what's going on there and because whenever people talk about kids, that's when they're using it to make you mad, you know? So something I throw in a lot, and it's hard because this has become something where, as you were pointing out, yeah, people are saying, oh, my issue isn't with like adult LGBT books, it's with kids books. And it's like, well, okay, because that's problematic in multiple ways. One, because you're assuming it's sexual, which it's not. And then also you're often pretending like these books that are for an older audience are in the kids library, you know? So, and the fact that people equate libraries with children and they don't even think about all the amazing adult services that are offered, I think is part of why it's so successful, which sucks. So that's part of the uphill battle, I think, is untangling that issue with the kids, you know?
People have that justice trigger inside of them. Like, obviously, you don't want someone who can't speak up for themselves, has something bad happen to them. It comes down to like what was it? That furniture skit where people were saying, was it Wayfair? Not Wayfair.
Oh, yeah, it was Pizzagate. It was Wayfair.
Yeah, where people were like, your kids are getting smuggled in furniture. Like, if you start thinking about it too much, like, you go, well, you know, does that really make a lot of sense? There was like two pieces of advice I think somebody had said. One was, if you're talking about a conspiracy, the more people that have to keep a secret for the conspiracy to exist, the less likely it is to be able to exist, because people aren't very good at keeping secrets. The other thing was, when you hear a piece of like something, you know, that's immediately upsetting, if it confirms your biases, you're less likely to check if it's accurate.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's something for anybody.
Right.
So if you go, oh, well, that sounds just like them, and then you don't look, you know, so.
Exactly.
Yeah. So those are just things to bear in mind. But it's easier said than done, obviously. So.
It's true. It's true. I mean, I think education is like a real opportunity there. Like that's kind of the thing. I mean, that's like one of my favorite things I teach, you know, is evaluation and kind of how to identify misinformation and sort of like the structures as to like why they happen, you know? So that's fun. I love it. And the students are really interested in it, and that helps. Like that is proven to help. Like if you are armed with that education, you are likelier to kind of suss out what's going on. So that is something that is kind of optimistic. Like if we can educate, if we could get more media literacy, right? Either within the formal classroom or even like libraries kind of doing more of that work, that'd be awesome. And it would help. It would help.
So like I was a transfer student. I was at community college. I was late in my game. You know, I was 26, 27 and at Berkeley when I transferred there, and I was doing the journalism like minor. And so I was there when Trump was like, journalists are the enemy.
Oh, yeah.
And so I go from that to then being here, and now it's just funny. It's like, well, no industries. That's even though like obviously Biden isn't like librarians are the enemy. It's just that the other stuff is happening in every
Right. Yeah.
to like talk about media, media literacy, all of that. A lot of people have a lot of distrust in news sources and all of that.
Yeah.
And in the government and in everything. So that makes life easy.
That's true. There's a lot of different ones. So too many to count sometimes.
Yeah. But I really appreciate like dedicating some time this morning to go over this with me.
Yeah, it was fun. I was like, honestly, I was like, hell yeah, I want to talk about book bans. I'm shocked that more people haven't.